I don't think I've ever seen an example where integral theory kind of fails to explain some dynamics going on in the world, like politics, workplaces, conflicts. Um, if you look through it through an integral lens, it's like very easy to understand what's going on.
Welcome to Let's Go Indigo. I'm your host, Isaac Holtz, and on a good day, Indigo Ike. Today we have our very first Let's Go Indigo interview. My good friend, Marin Petrov, is here. And
Hello.
usually a lot of interviews, they do an orange thing where they just list all the accomplishments that the person has done. And I'm going to skip that formally, but you'll hear some of the orange things that Marin has done in his life. We met years ago at an animation studio, a feature film animation studio that was a very orange company in some ways, owned by a very amber company. It was owned by Fox, and the studio was called Blue Sky Studios. We were animation artists, and a lot of the artists were, the best ones were green, and there were plenty of orange individuals there as well. But the artists were usually green. And then what happened was at the studio, there were a number of us who began discussing integral topics. So welcome, Marin.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So let's start there at the studio, and we'll get into where you are now. And just to frame this for everyone listening, Marin has, more than anybody I know, taken the ideas of integral and not just applied them to his own life and his own inner development and his own worldview, but has specifically been very, very interested in how to bring these ideas to the workplace. There are others in the world doing that, but I personally feel like Marin, of all the integralists I know directly, Marin has a real passion for this, and he has a real history with a lot of heartbreak. It's a very difficult job to introduce integral to anyone, but it's even at work to try to bring the level of development and the processes and the communal, not just the individual, but the communal aspect to a Teal place.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll get into your journey, especially more recently, or since you left the animation studio, to journey into more explicitly integral. But why don't you describe the time we knew each other, but the time that we first discussed Ken Wilber, Aquil, lines of development?
Sure, yeah. I was thinking to mention something that's still very fresh in my mind after all these years. And I remember very well, like, we were at the studio in the kitchen, in the big kitchen, if you remember. I think there was nobody else around us, and we just went for a coffee and sat down at the tables, and you were like asking me, hey, how are you doing? And I said, well, I have some hard time thinking about some, life questions, and I'm trying to reason about them. And I mentioned to you that I have a bunch of friends who are very entrepreneurial. They start companies and are very successful in life, but they kind of suffer through this because there is like no time to live in a way. Like they try to hustle a lot and achieve a lot, but it's like very hard for them. When I talk to them, it's like, oh, it's all the same thing, I'm doing all this work, and there is like just no time for me or my family. And at the same time, I noticed I have a bunch of friends who are like they prefer to live their life more freely, like trying to enjoy life, surf on the beaches, go climbing, that kind of stuff. Very outdoorsy and hippie style life. And they're happy, but financially very struggling in a bit. And I'm like, is there a way to combine it because it's like very clearly there is like positives in both. But why is it like people are either this or that? And you're like, oh yeah, let me tell you about integral theory. And that's like the first time where where you're like try to explain me this, and I was like, wow, this explains so much. I even have like shivers thinking about it because it was like very profound moment for me, I remember. But yeah, that explained me so much at the time, and still, and to this day, I don't think I've ever seen an example where integral theory kind of fails to explain some dynamics going on in the world, like politics, workplaces, conflicts. If you look through it through an integral lens, it's like very easy to understand what's going on.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
yeah.
And it's great that you mentioned. I'm honored that and touched that you would consider that moment a major shift, or which led to where you are now. And I know back in those days, I got much better at introducing the topics. I struggled through a lot of people who just didn't want to do anything about it. But it was really special when it clicked and when it landed. And I hope this channel, I hope the viewers, it's something that obviously maybe it's already landed, or if they're watching this now and learning integral, it's starting to click and make sense of the world. The moment that I remember most was probably a follow-up discussion to that. At some point, you also were reaching a sort of crisis point in terms of you were really dreaming up what was possible at an animation or an effects studio. And Marin had written, it turns out in this discussion, he tells me that he had written an animation effects manifesto about the best ways that we could operate a studio that did what he was imagining, what he was struggling to make sense of before, which was really push the envelope and work and create something special, but also create a work-life balance. And I had mentioned that, have you heard of the book that just came out around that time, Reinventing Organizations? And which is a wonderful book. And Marin went and got it. You went and got it. And within, I want to say days, you had figured out a more practical direction with where you wanted to go. And I don't know, within how much time, weeks, months, you were leaving the studio to create, and this is before COVID, a distributed, remote, holocratic, and we'll talk about that in a moment, a VR company.
Yeah. I remember everything happened kind of at the same time, very fast. I was like struggling to see a way forward, and after all these discussions, and reading the book Reinventing Organizations, I was like, okay, there is very clearly a way forward which aligns with everything I'm thinking about. And it's like, I just wanted to see how it will be possible, bringing very high skilled people together, but creating a more, and we'll talk about it, Teal company, which is not only about the business but about the purpose, about how we relate to each other as people in the company, all the positives of orange and green integrated together.
And there's probably a ton of self-management movements in the world, but at least when you started with Hack and Paint, you were definitely interested in a very specifically integral Teal version of self-management that makes development explicit. With Hack and Paint, what Marin did initially, he took the recommendation to look into holacracy, which is a governance model that was developed within the explicitly integral camp. I think the founder of holacracy was workshopping it when he was into Integral and into Ken Wilber and was in Colorado at some conferences, if I know loosely the history.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Marin took that we call that a technology. It was a structure for how any group can operate in a way that's called holocratic. And the idea is that it even if you're not all Integral or Teal of a developmental stage, everybody operating, whether they're at a green, orange, amber, even red, they should fit together if everybody is abiding by certain principles. So then the challenge was, and that's why at the time Marin had invited me to be a Integral advisor, and which I loved. It was perfect for me. I would love to find a company that would be, willing to bring me on in that same aspect. And that was, I had tried to introduce Integral or holacracy or these ideas about Teal and development and integrating to Blue Sky, but it became very clear. And even I was able to have discussion in the early days when Frederick, the author of Reinventing Organizations, wasn't as busy, as he became very popular very quickly. I was the first person to write to him. It helped that Ken had written the introduction and I was introduced to the book early. But I had tried, and so I talked to Frederick about the difficulty it is to get anyone in leadership interested in integrative, holistic, Teal ideas. And his conclusion is that the leadership definitely almost always has to already be interested or growing into that, and then they're able to actually insist that a company try or shift into a Teal operating mode. So what was great about Hack and Paint was Marin was already interested, dipping into Teal, and ready and willing to make it explicit and make the processes Teal. The difficulty that we run, always any group is going to run into, is can you build up those processes so that all the other individuals that are green, orange, don't bring the center of gravity down. And so obviously you don't have to have everybody at Teal, but the more people you have at Teal or above, the higher the group center of gravity is going to be, and the less pull that the group's going to have. And so do you recall any kind of situations at Hack and Paint in those early days, or even at the other company is called RGB Notes, and that was, like you said, a smaller group, so maybe easier.
Yeah. I think even before I started it, I was like thinking explicitly about that, like how to have a diverse group of people but still operate under Teal principles. It's hard because, as you mentioned, it's the more people that are at a certain stage, that's how mostly the culture and the company will be. And yeah, I feel like there were people at orange, there were people at green, and holacracy kind of helped with that, like kind of bridge everything together. And if you are operating under orange mindset, it's easy for you because you see a rule and you're like, okay, that makes sense. Like, it will make me more productive if I follow this rule. And then if you're at green, you see it more as a way to bring your whole self to work, like without any judgment, without any, just to feel like a normal person and not hide any side from you. Like, if you're angry, you can express your anger in a healthy way. If you're, if you want to move the company in a certain way, you could do it. So for me, the challenging part is like maybe explaining what self-management really is, because that's where I saw a lot of misunderstandings at the beginning, and it took time to kind of say, okay, that's what it is. And for me, self-management is we as a group together can set certain goals and direction for the company, but everyone in their role, and there is like very clear roles, not titles, but under your role you can do anything you feel is the right thing to do, without being afraid that someone will judge you for it, without being afraid that you make a mistake. In fact, mistakes are encouraged and you should learn from them, and we as a company can learn from them. It's more about doing the thing and communicating what you're doing rather than asking for permission explicitly, or like trying to use consensus methods to kind of get everyone on board. Like it's more about you as a person being more proactive, and maybe the best way I can explain it is like a basketball team. If you like basketball, so I will use that metaphor. But everyone has a clear role. No, like the coach is not telling everyone what to do in any moment. Like the players make the decisions themselves, and they try to win the game. So it's like the best of orange and green. Like when a team is healthy, there is like this cohesion that it's very hard to explain with words. But yeah, you just feel supported. Like you feel like people believe in you and they don't judge you. That's all.
Yeah, I remember when sharing this idea of self-management to others, the people who are most locked into the traditional method of management with supervisors, their supervisors, a very amber kind of way, and Orange has its own version. You'd like to think that the best people who are at that skill become the managers, but then they're not always the best people good with people.
Yeah.
And then you get people who are good with people, but they don't know what the skills are happening. And really a self-management system, when done correctly, is quite elegant. And the thing that I would always tell those who are really afraid of, like, oh, we'll get rid of managers, nothing will get done, or think people will go rogue. But there's a few subtle principles that at least Holacracy always encouraged, which were that if your decision affects somebody else, you have to have done the diligence to check with them on how your decision would affect them.
Yeah.
And then there's also the notion of checking in with experts. So if there's somebody who is in the group who's an expert at that topic, you're also kind of required to have done your diligence to check their opinion about it. It's still since it's your role, it's still your final say about what direction you're going to go with, but as long as you've taken into account those perspectives. And from a Teal point of view, it seems kind of obvious. You want to include as many relevant perspectives, but for people who are new to it, that's not so obvious.
Yeah, and those two principles are kind of formalized in this world of self-management as the consent decision-making process and the advice process. Like it's like the ideas behind it are the same. You're basically proactive in making a decision, but you still check with others how it will affect them, and it requires you to be empathic and able to listen. Like I feel that's like the most important skill probably. Trying to take others' perspectives. When you hear their advice, try to integrate it. Or if you completely disagree with them, you can say so. Like it's more about healthy relationships, how we relate to each other as people and as in our roles, rather than trying to dominate and say, oh, my way is better than your way. It's like, well, let me hear what you think about it, and I'll still make the decision, but I'm interested about like what you have to say.
At Hack and Pay, in these early days of attempting self-management in this new company you started. Can you maybe say in the RGB notes, the other company, the smaller company, was successful enough to be sold to Amazon? Correct?
Yeah, eventually.
And then, and you can speak a little bit about what you thought the VR company's downside was, but which I know we talked earlier, and it was more of a notion of just the adoption of the technology and being ahead of that, actually, even if it's hasn't quite even or might not get there. Can you say something in terms of this, how the size of the group made it challenging to do self-management or do a holacratic process?
Yeah, well, what I remember is like 1 year after we closed the company, we talked with most of the people who were involved, and something they shared stayed with me, which was they all said that was probably the best company they've ever worked at. And that was my vision and my goal, to people to feel great working together. So in that sense, maybe we achieved what we wanted to achieve.
How much did you run it, like, to go back to the initial impulse to create something that was great, something that was successful, achieve something, and then also this work-life balance? How much did you find people only wanted to do the first one still? How much did people take advantage and saying, I'm just going to do the life stuff, and you guys can deal with all the difficult finances and all that stuff? I would think this is orange and green, in a way. And then how did that pan out? Because most of the people at the company aren't going to be Teal.
Yeah,
they're going to fit in and work within that framework. But how did you experience that?
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of pointing at probably one of the patterns I wanted to talk about, which is the clash between orange and green, which usually happens. Orange trying to achieve, hustle, be the best, and then green trying to have this work-life balance, striving for equality between everyone, mutual understanding. And that's like a major pattern that most companies that try to do self-management probably face. And I see it all the time, like even in my current company. That's like probably the major trigger point all of the time. Earlier I chatted with ChatGPT about, okay, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you integrate both? And it's like the first advice it gave me was introduce developmental awareness, and I've tried that many times. And here is what usually happens when you talk about integral theory. Someone at Orange will look at the levels and will say, oh, I like that. It's like, let me see where I fit. And they see this orange, achievement, and then they see the pluralistic worldview that is above them, and they're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Why are these people who are always talking about emotions and all that, they don't do anything productive? Like, why are they there? And it's like very hard for Orange to accept that. And at the same time, green looks at it and says, I don't like this level of stuff. It's a little, this allergy to hierarchy shows up. And it's like, I mean, it's like really hard to show the positives of both to someone that is at a certain stage before Teal. And maybe you can share some tips about how you how you actually do that.
The short answer is you don't.
You don't, yeah.
So, the long answer, you get, and you probably know this from experience, like you were mentioning in the few examples you gave. You get better and better at speaking their language, and just trying to give it a little twist that maybe nudges them along in terms of keeping them invested and on board. A company's probably going to need the orange people. That you're going to need the green people. We know this from a Teal perspective, but I think it's a kind of a funny thing that the way God structured development. You point out exactly this. It's kind of funny that orange is going to want to be at the top, even though they're not. They want to truly get to the top, or at least further along of hierarchical development. They're going to need to pass through a stage that's much more sensitive, much more egalitarian. And then those who have got there from other circumstances in their life, they've forgotten, they kind of have an amnesia of their orange self. And if they're truly green, they were truly orange for a good chunk of their life, 5-7 years at least. And they really hate that side of themselves in a way. It's where people are at in their lives, and so it's really crazy that this is actually how development seems to have occurred. Now, it's quite possible that Teal could go away tomorrow and everything above it, and we're left with green on top, and green could go away, and then maybe from orange, if orange survives, some other pattern may happen that's different than what we call green. But it seems very likely that groove is cut deep enough that this is how humans develop, or at some point began developing. And by all indications, that isn't going to change. And so that is the pattern. This achieving, want to be in the best, individualistic, rational stage gives way. When that doesn't work so much, it gives way to a much more egalitarian, sensitive, multicultural point of view. And I think so. I'd be interested in where you're at currently, because it sounds like that environment ideally wants to be green. So really, it sounds like from our discussions before, you've worked really hard to keep it green, and because that despite green's downfalls, and their downfalls do make it very hard for them to make a leap into teal or to grow beyond it, but that if green goes away, we're back at an orange cultural level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another major pattern which I have seen, and you can clearly see it in the world as well, not just companies. In the past 10, maybe more years, Democrats kind of ruled everywhere, which, they come from more green, pluralistic worldview. But even Ken Wilber said that, okay, if you don't go to Theo and try to integrate, it's very easy to fall down and regress into orange. So what I have seen happening is companies usually start with this idea of fairness as more as a trying to fight the status quo, which is like all the orange values of just achieving for the sake of achieving, just doing business for the sake of business, and trying to ask the question why. Okay, why are we doing this? And trying to get a higher purpose and perspective on the things. Like just making the numbers go up is clearly not very passionate goal by itself. All the green people that start these self-managed companies think about those, and that's how they start at the beginning. But it's like very easy to see the shadow sides of green at that stage, which are everything should be fair. when actually fairness doesn't exist, and there is no hierarchy when actually hierarchy helps sometimes. They get stuck at this green stage. They cannot progress. The business doesn't work very well. It kind of feels more like some friends working together rather than an actual company. And then when the business side starts picking up, people say, "Oh, but maybe that's better," and they start acting more from orange principles and orange mindset. And yeah, that's usually a pattern that happens. Like people that are at green, and you think, "Oh, it will be easy to just integrate the previous stages and evolve to teal," actually regress into orange and even amber and red sometimes.
If green is going to put red behavior on par with, normal amber or orange or green behavior, there's going to be a problem. So the elite, they need to be able to stack and say there are some behaviors that are better, and unhealthy red is on the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
It's like, anything is going to be better than unhealthy red at a company.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you're also discussing more subtle things that are better or worse, and that is that sticking to your green values and persisting and trying to grow even beyond it, but sticking to at least a green framework despite its pitfalls. If you just let go of it, you're going to get less better in a sense of development. At least we could talk about the better things about green, but you just you go back into an orange environment. From at least when you joined, that's not what you signed up for, or that's not. You can find that more readily elsewhere. Green, to its credit, there's less green companies available just because that takes time to develop and even just want to form a green company.
Yeah.
So they're precious, and so it's great that you're carving out space, or you're in the fight to at least keep it there, if not, have the whole system grow into a more holistic system. What do you think? Do you think, because this comes back to that question of leadership. Leadership almost always has to be interested in Integral to make a company integral. They have to almost just say, we are doing a holacratic process. We're doing this system. If you're talking to green leaders,
that never happens. that almost never happens if you're talking to green leaders. Like it's very hard for green founders and leaders to lead. Actually, it's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like for them that's not the right way to go. It's like, oh, we should allow everyone to do everything. Okay, fine, but if you don't hold the space, then what happens is regression.
It's a process to get that education of these topics into the world. That's what this channel is mostly about. And then I'm sure when you're at a workplace, there's a fair amount of time spent in conversations educating the others about some of these topics in terms of, and you're obviously going to flow and communicate to them with where their development is at. But I imagine you spend a fair amount of time pushing ideas, maybe actual. I mean, I'm sure I would imagine that's the benefit you bring to a company more than, say, a certain specific project.
Yes, but that's a very hard work. It's sometimes tiring, to be honest, because I don't know. Sometimes it's kind of lonely in a way, because you either get met with blank eyes when misunderstanding, or it's just challenging to try to integrate both all the positives of previous stages without sounding like a lunatic or something.
Yeah, I've been there, and also maybe this is a good place to circle back to what we said initially when I said that when it lands, it's really special. And if anybody's made it this far in the interview, it's obviously landed for them, and that's really special. I'm saying to you, the viewer. So it is lonely, you know. Ken would always say, with the greater depth, you know, you can think of orange is more depth than amber, and green is more depth than orange, and teal has more depth than green. That there's the greater the depth, the smaller the span, or the smaller the number of people operating. Just because purely it takes time. It's kind of like a fountain in a way, or people hate the idea of a pyramid, but there really is that notion that there are just less green people than orange. There's going to be less teal people than green, and it does get a little lonely. So I'm glad that you and I are reconnecting, and I really, you know, it makes me feel more whole, makes me feel more normal, and I know it feels the same way to you. Marin, I want to leave the room for any topics you want to bring up that we haven't covered. But before that, how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm active on Twitter, X now. The handle is Marin Waves, or just on marinpetrov.com, my personal blog and website. And yeah, that's probably the two best places, I would say.
I'll post those in the description.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe just one thing I forgot to mention. For people who kind of feel like they understand the perspectives of both orange and green, maybe that's like a good indication that they are at Teal. Like I feel like a lot of the work required is like a personal developmental work. Like, I mean, you introduced me yourself to shadow work. It just requires a lot of introspection, and not you know, trying to see more yourself rather than the people around you. I mean, it helps, but like I feel like it's a lot of introspection work.
Yeah, and I've been pushing on the channel. Initially it's a lot of cognitive work in terms of you kind of have to just read. Either, I mean, back in the old day, you had to just read a book by Ken, or you know, very limited models available or ways to boost the cognitive line. My channel hopes to be little by little. You hear some of these ideas, you spend time, like you were saying, you look inward, so you have to go, oh, where have I seen red within myself? Where have I seen orange within myself? You know, one of the things, actually, I'll give this out to the listeners. Contact me. I'd be happy to go through, if I connect with you, we can go through your chapters of your life, and you can see, like Marin was discussing when he first made a shift to teal, or it was pointed in that direction. I bet, Marin, you could point out when you shifted to green, when you shifted to orange, when you shifted to amber.
It's very clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I remember when I started, for example, in the animation industry, it was like, I don't know, 30 years ago. And the first time I got promoted, it was like purely on orange values, like, oh, you're just doing a good job, so you should be a you know, a leader for this team. And I was so bad at it. It was like, man, I mean, it just, your lens is orange at best. So you don't care about people's feelings. You don't care about how someone is, you know, like you just see them as tools to do the job done. And it's so much better if you operate under green values. Like, if you're a leader with green values of a team, your team is happy. And let's say that, like, they feel good in that team, and in a team that feels good and is more productive at the end of the day. So like, actually the orange goals are easily met. But yeah, you can clearly see how you grow up in stages. And now I have like 2 kids. One is 4 years old and the other is 10. The 4 years old is like, I want popcorn. And I'm like, well, we cannot get it because we don't have yet at home. No, I want popcorn. It's like very clearly they're at red, and it's like this egoistic stage where they just cannot see other perspectives even exist. While my 10 years old is like, okay, if I tell him we cannot get it because of this, he's like, okay. So it takes like just a few years to go from red to amber maybe, but it's very clear how even the kids develop.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think kids, I first learned all the integral stuff when I was teaching high school.
Okay, yeah.
Freshmen. And so they were, on good days they were high school type kids, and on the bad days they were red, impulsive, and even magenta running around.
Yeah.
And it was really clear to see on the outside, and then I go, oh well, all right, either I see that in myself now at times, or I see myself when I was that age and that developmental, where it was normal and healthy, like your kids. Yeah. Yeah, for those viewers listening, we're barely scratching at some of the surface, but I kind of even want to point out that once you learn this enough, you can have conversations like Marin and I, where we're just saying red, orange, green, and we know what we're talking. We're both kind of pointing toward the same thing. It's really amazing that there's a shared understanding. I don't even think in like normal everyday conversation, people will continue talking to each other and they feel like they're talking about the same thing, but I don't know. I don't know if they have exactly the same, what they're pointing toward being the same. And I'm not saying Marin and I are like locked in and one like completely see what each other are seeing, but it's amazing the amount of shared view you can have from this vantage point.
Yeah. Somebody would say my kid is throwing a tantrum, and me and you will say, oh, they're doing some red behavior stuff. It's like it's the same thing, but it's like, yeah, you can understand each other better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Marin, we could do this all day. We'll wrap up here, but keep at it. We'll have you back on if there's any updates and new things happening in your life, or we just want to touch on another topic.
Sure. Just fun.
Okay.
Thanks, Ike.
Right. Well, to the Let's Go Indigo viewers, I wish you well, and I know Marin wishes you all well on your developmental journey, and be well.
Thank you.